He's been an entrepreneur for over 20 years. He just exited his company for 7 figures, so I'm excited about understanding a little bit more about Sanoderm Medical. It was one of the largest tattoo bandage companies in the entire nation, and this will be interesting. You'll have to get the crowd to see how many tattoos you really have. But we would like Scott Hughes to come to the stage. Thank you for being with us today, Scott. So we'll just speak up a little. Here, you use this for now.
All right.
Can you guys pass it back and forth?
Yeah, that'll work. So again, what we wanted to do with this, a little bit of experience, is we like to draw out real stories from real entrepreneurs that are in the trenches, but also have had an exit and they've been able to create massive value for their company. But before we get to an exit, tell us about yourself and about how you got to the point where you are today. I know there's 4 segments that we want to go through today within this journey, so share with us a little bit more about that.
All right, awesome. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Super happy to be here. I love being in a room full of founders, builders, full of ambition. This is a lot of fun. So really looking forward to sharing some of my story with you guys. But a little background on me. I grew up, I was going to be an oral surgeon. That was my whole plan. Went to college, did the pre-dental thing, and then I went and shadowed an oral surgeon. And as soon as they cut open the gums and brought out the chisel and hammer, I could not handle that. I was sick, and I was like, I need a new plan. So I hurried and switched my major to Spanish because that was the fastest way out of college. And then I'm like, okay, I got a degree in Spanish. What do I do now? So I Googled, Spanish jobs. Ended up being a paralegal for injury claims in Spanish. And it was really quickly that I realized I'm not an employee. I can't do this. So I started doing some research and reading books, Think and Grow Rich, several other books, and I decided to start a mastermind. And from that mastermind, I started my first business, Sanoderm Medical.
So, Sanoderm Medical, it's such a niche market, right? Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, as entrepreneurs and as business owners, you're always looking for ways that you can improve on what has been developed or make something better. For example, we have this gentleman right over here is patented, multiple patents, right? Inventors. So share with us more about that process and how that began.
All right, sure. So how many people have tattoos? Most people have tattoos these days. That's just how it is. So I actually don't have a tattoo, which is kind of funny. I worked in the tattoo industry, it was actually one of the largest tattoo supply companies in the world. Okay. And never got a tattoo myself. But maybe someday. I still haven't ruled that out. But so the business started in this mastermind, like I mentioned. Me and some buddies and coworkers got together. We talked about different business ideas, and a friend of mine had just gotten a tattoo, and they wrapped it up in saran wrap. And I thought, saran wrap, that's dumb. Like, that's unsanitary. They used masking tape to hold it on. And so I had just noticed somebody else wearing a bandage that they got in the hospital, and I was like, that would work on a tattoo. So I found out who manufactured it. It was 3M. Everyone knows the company 3M. They make Post-it notes of freaking everything for their Fortune 120 on the Fortune list. So I called them up and said, hey, I want to be a distributor. And they said, great, this is how much it costs. This is your licensing fees. And I was like, dang. Like, I had no money. I had no really business experience. I didn't even know about raising money. But I didn't give up right then and there. I decided to do some more research, looked into it. Everyone knows patents are only good for 20 years. I looked into their patent on those bandages, and it had expired 3 years ago. So I said, hey, 3M, can you send me all the specs on these bandages? They said, yeah, here you go. Forwarded it to China. And found a manufacturer to make the bandages in China for 1/10 of the cost that I would have got them from 3M. And now I had a business. I had an opportunity. I could afford it. I could sell the product for way less than what 3M was selling it to the hospitals, because the tattoo industry would not support the same pricing structure that the hospitals did. So from there, I started taking these bandages just door to door to see if it would work. Literally, I had no business yet. I just had bandages. I had no website, no logo, no nothing. I walked from door to door with my unbranded bandages in Walmart bags just to see if people would buy them. Okay, and they did. Even though I had no tattoos, I would walk in, and luckily I had, you know, the anatomy and physiology background from college, so I could teach them, like, this is how your skin heals, this is the anatomy, this is the physiology, and they loved it. They loved actually getting that education, because there's no education for tattoo artists. And so once I had kind of exhausted the Salt Lake area, I decided, okay, now I'm going to build a website, now I'm going to get a domain, now I'm going to get designs, logos, and started selling from there.
So inspirational, and that's another thing, right? Within business, it's the data points that you're searching for. You've got to understand your customer. Like this gentleman, he's been in the kilt industry for 30 years. I don't know if you guys got to meet this gentleman, but kilt industry, that's extremely niche as well. But once you start having that feedback that you're looking for, now you're off to the races. Doesn't really matter if you have per se a brand, but you have interested customers, which in essence create the valuation of your company, because again, we're talking about an exit a little bit later today. So share with us, how'd you really start rolling? I know before you said you was it out of your garage, or what was it?
Yeah, so when I was starting this, like, this was I call my first stage of business, like, is this gonna work phase, right? And that phase actually took me a while. It took me about a year to exhaust the Salt Lake Valley. And then I started cold calling. And this is all a side hustle still. I was still working as a paralegal, doing my Spanish injury claims for Siegfried and Jensen, right? So the cool thing about the tattoo industry though, tattoo shops are open till like midnight often. So I could work a 9 to 5, come home, do my cold calls at 10 p.m. and they didn't care at all. And the other cool thing in the tattoo industry, when I would call them, many of them told me, hey, you're the first solicitor to ever call us. Where can you find an industry like that? It was perfect timing for me. So they were totally willing to talk, very willing to listen, try out the products. So it was very, very fantastic. I love that. So now that I'm cold calling, sending out emails, sending out samples, I started looking for distributors. So I wanted to go big really fast. Within my first couple of months after my website, I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna Google and make myself a list of all the tattoo wholesalers in the country, or in the world actually, blasted out a big just email to everybody, and lo and behold, somebody from Sweden responded, and I closed my first distributor in Sweden. And now I was international within just a few months of launching my website. And then a few months after that, another Swedish company saw what they were doing, and then they got on board too. And then Spain, I actually started selling in Europe faster than I started selling here initially. So like I said, we're gonna go through 4 different phases of my business. That first phase is this gonna work? Phase 2 is, holy shit, this is working, right? And so I started making money. Didn't have any employees yet. It was still kind of a side hustle. And I started treating the business kind of like my personal ATM, right? This isn't necessarily a good thing, but this is a phase that I went through, but it was fun. You know, bought a boat, built I called it my practice dream house and whatnot. And, but then I did have a conversation with a mentor who told me, you know, the way exits work, the way business valuations work is, it's based on usually your profit. And every dollar you take out of the company, you're taking $5 to $10 off of your exit value.
Extremely wise. I mean, it's interesting the different scenarios that you had gone through there, from building the business to then now understanding the things that you need to understand. So share with us more about that specific scenario where you started to realize that you needed to put some structures and guardrails around your business. For those business owners out there, obviously the M&A service providers in the room are like, yep, you needed those guardrails a long time ago. But share with us a little bit more about that specific case scenario, and then also the team members that you needed to have.
All right, so at this point I was still running the business by myself. I had a few employees who were packaging orders, who were doing customer service, but I was still managing most of the business. And what really flipped the switch was when I started seeing competitors pop up. I ran for about 5 years before anybody picked up on what I was doing. So the first competitor that popped up actually popped up here in Utah, and I bought them right away. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna let you do this. So before they got too big, I just bought it. And then another one popped up, and I was like, I can't keep doing this. And so, and then a really big distributor popped up in Europe, and they hit the ground hard. And it was a company called Dermalize Pro, and they were kind of scaring me. They were pissing me off because they were copying all of my copy off my website. They used pictures off of my website. And so I looked into it a little bit. Like I said, their name was Dermalize Pro. And I thought, why didn't they just call it Dermalize? So found out Dermalize.com was owned by a gentleman in Salt Lake City. So I called him up and said, hey, I want to buy this domain. It's a domain of my biggest competitor. And he said, no, but let's go to lunch. So I went and met with him. Turns out he was running another skincare company that was doing really well. And he said, I don't want to sell you this domain, but I love what you're doing. I want to work with you. And I said, okay. So we made a deal where he actually gave me the domain. We then trademarked the name Dermalize. And he ended up becoming a partner, investing into some equity through this whole process. But it was a cool deal because now my biggest competitor could not sell in the United States because I owned the trademark and the domain. So that was a fun story, but now I had a partner. And with partners and we started hiring more employees comes a lot more accountability. Right now, you definitely can't be treating the company like your personal bank. You got to put more controls in place. I had to put myself on a salary and whatnot. And from there, we continued to ramp up the company, preparing for the next phase.
Share with us that next phase.
Okay, so as the company grew, like I found that for myself, I really, really enjoyed the innovation, the whole startup phase. Once the company, I love being an innovator, not as much a manager. So the company kept growing, got more and more employees. I found myself having less to do because the goal is to hire employees better than yourself, right? So we had employees who were doing better than I would have done anyway. And so I felt more like a manager, and it kind of grew beyond what I wanted to do. So the next phase is, all right, we're really going to dial things in and prep this for sale. And what that really involved for me was I had all of my employees go in and make Loom videos of all of their tasks for a whole week. So now if anyone buys the business, they know exactly what everybody does. Document all your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, right? We actually hired now CFO to come in and help us organize our books and clean things up and make our margins what they needed to be, to make our books what they needed to be so that we could look more attractive to buyers.
Yeah, that process of cleaning up. Many conversations I've had with founders is they're extremely ambitious, and then they go through this phase just like what you've gone through, but then they come to this end, and an acquirer is looking for a system. Mm-hmm. They're not looking just to buy a business. They want what the system is going to output. So can you share a little bit more about that and how you guys created more value within the company, and then what initially happened at the very end of the exit?
So yeah, so just to elaborate even more, we documented the heck out of everything. We outlined what our meeting cadences were. We outlined what all of our goals and targets were for 90 days, 120 days, 5 years. We really had everything totally spelled out. So if anybody were to walk in, it was a system that was already ready to go. So every employee position was fully defined, how all the tech stack worked together was defined, how all the books were running was well defined, and how we ran our meetings, and we took meticulous notes on everything that we did so that anybody could come in and look and be like, oh, okay, this is how they run this company. And so it was a really fun process actually to kind of get that all dialed in, and it actually wish I would have done it sooner, because we would have really, it was very, very beneficial to have that just documented and nailed in and so precise, and it would have been much better to start that a lot sooner.
Well, how long would you suggest a business owner to begin their exit strategy, in essence, within their business, for the business owners in the room here?
Well, I would suggest starting that process as soon as you can. There's no reason to delay that. Like I said earlier, every dollar you take out of the business is going to take money out of your bank when you exit, right? Depending on your multiple, in my industry, multiples were around 5x. Software can be a lot more than that. But it varies from industry to industry. But just keep that in mind. Every dollar you take out of the business is going to significantly reduce the amount you sell your company for. So, yeah. So, anyway,
that's good. So walk us through this actual exit and the little intricacies. You share with us what you like and maybe some tactical strategies, but also some things that you've learned along the way. And then we'll open up the floor for questions as well.
So like I said, the business had grown to a place where I was ready to move on. And so we dialed all this in, and now we started shopping for buyers. And there was a lot of complications. We were a good-sized company, so we had, lawsuits we had to try and cleaning up our books. But the whole process of selling, you got to keep in mind, it's going to take longer than you expect. Like I kept thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be done this month. Oh yeah, it's going to be done this month. No, it took several months. There were tons and tons of extensions. We actually changed buyers a couple of times throughout the process. And then you get right down to the closing day and, oh, nope, 30 more days, 60 more days. So it's definitely something that takes a lot of patience. I know there's probably people who've done it more cleanly and more smoothly, but in my case, it took just under a year to go through the whole process of, nailing down the buyer, nailing down all the contracts. And so it's just be ready for, a lot of work, and don't expect things to go smoothly, because there's always going to be some fun surprises.
We sincerely appreciate you again with your time here, and also helping with some of the entrepreneurs that may have questions, but also that they can inspire off of your story as well. That's one thing that when I interviewed you before, I was inspired myself personally, just based on, having a product, didn't even have a website, hit the streets, started building, and if that isn't inspiring, for you, I'll take the inspiration that you're missing. But Anyway, any last words, and then we'll also open up for questions for everyone here.
Yeah, just on a business operation standpoint, you kind of hit on one of my favorite points. One of the things I learned very early on from a mentor was, most people preach, oh, design a product, build a product, and then sell it, right? That's totally backwards from what this mentor taught me. Sell first, then design, then build. So when I started this business, that's what I did. I had samples made, I got product, but I didn't waste time with the website, didn't waste time with a logo, no design, no boxes, and I just hit the streets. I sold first. And once I had kind of mastered or dominated the Salt Lake Valley, there were 80 tattoo shops in the Salt Lake Valley back then, and I'm like, okay, this is real. Now I have money coming in, I can go ahead and do more. And then with doing it that way, I never raised a single dollar. This whole thing was run just from the ground up, grassroots, bootstrapping it. So I would just encourage anybody, and then with any product or any business, sell it first. Get a purchase order if you can, get a sample and sell it, and not to your mom. My mom's over here, she's great. She's a huge fan of my company. She tells everybody about it. But yeah, sales to your mom, your brother don't count. You got to give an arm's length transaction to a stranger. And if you can do that, now you've got, some potential.
I'm going to open it up for questions. Anybody have any questions? Right here.
I've been taking it easy. I just got a new boat, so I try and go boating almost every day. But I do have plans. So I did build a second business throughout this whole process. It was also in the tattoo industry. It was actually a social platform / marketing engine for tattoo artists, which I sold that in 2021. Unfortunately, the group that bought it abandoned the project, so I'm really tempted to do it again. We had some fantastic traction with that platform. We had 200,000 users on the platform when I sold it. So, and now it's totally gone. It doesn't even exist anymore. So I'm tempted to rebuild that. I'm also just talking to people. If people are looking for an operator, I'll look at those deals probably after boating season. Next, is that good? Any other questions? Right here, James.
Repeat the question.
Did you just work
The question was, did you use a business broker? No, we did not. So in the tattoo industry, mergers and acquisitions are actually very rare, which is one of the reasons why we were able to be successful. There's no venture money being spent in the tattoo industry. There's no capital being infused. Most of the companies are being run by tattoo artists in their spare time. So for me to come in with a more corporate, business-like approach was one reason we were able to be successful, but we did not go the traditional broker route. We were searching more strategic buyers, acquaintances, people who would be interested that way. Another question? Over here?
What industries are you open to opportunities?
What industries?
Oh, so the question is, after boating season, what industries am I open to? I would be open to pretty much anything. Like, I just love, like I've said, I don't even have a tattoo. Like, I worked in the industry for 15 years. I had a pro team of 150 tattoo artists that I knew really, really well. Almost every one of them was begging to give me my first tattoo. And these are all like Ink Master, famous level tattoo artists, and I just never did it. So I was never super passionate about the tattoo industry per se, but the idea of business in general. So to answer your question, I love that more beginning phase, the more startup phase. And as long as it's business, I love it.
We'll take one more. Anybody else?
All right, Milton.
Scott, did you have fun?
Oh yeah, dude.
Oh yeah, so I had so much fun. The tattoo industry was an absolute blast. The first time I walked into a tattoo shop, I was terrified. Right, I had no tattoos, scrawny little white kid back then walking into a tattoo shop, and I'm like, but I did wear long sleeves and long pants, so I was scared of getting called out. But I learned real fast that the tattoo artists were some of the coolest, most fun, down-to-earth people ever, And where they had not been hit up by salesmen every single day like people are in other industries, it was great. We did trade shows all over the world and met some of the coolest people and coolest tattoo artists. And when we'd go to trade shows, we would actually set up our booth and we would talk to all the tattoo artists and say, hey, when you're done with your tattoos, because tattoo conventions are actually just big rooms full of tattoo artists tattooing, right? They're not actually like regular conventions where people are selling things. They're just 300 artists doing tattoos. And so we'd go tell them, hey, when you're done with your tattoo, send them over to us and we'll clean them up, we'll give them a bandage, and then we'll sell them. We didn't tell the artists that part, but that's what we did. And so we got to just talk to so many people who just got their new tattoos, and they were always so excited. I would always ask them, like, hey, do you love your tattoo? Every single one just said, yes, I love it. And I'm like, really? Sometimes, but most of them are pretty cool. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. Building businesses, the whole strategy, building teams, that's just a blast. I definitely love it.
That's good. Well, let's give Scott here a round of applause, and thank you so much for joining us.